Hi everyone, and I think we're live. Welcome to my channel. For those new here, my name's Nikki, and you've joined me for what is this year a monthly series talking about my language learning. Sorry, I'm screwing my eyes up because I took my glasses off to prevent all the reflection of the screen on my glasses. And now, as I want to see how the video is going, I have to squint. Sorry, I'll try to stop. Yes, hopefully the volume is better for you this time. I know the live stream last month, I was trying out some new tech, and although it looked fine on the tests, when the live stream actually went out on YouTube, the audio was incredibly quiet. So I'm back to, I've still got some new tech, but I've moved back to some of the older ones. So hopefully this time you will be able to hear me okay. So as the banner here says at the bottom, today we're talking about dabbling in languages, because I've now covered the languages, the 8 languages that I studied, am studying, continuing to in more detail. And now I'm going to talk about one new language I've recently started, plus others that I've dabbled in on and off, sort of the whys and wherefores of that. So let me just, sorry, itchy nose. Let me get rid of this banner. There we go. Okay. So thinking about dabbling in languages, I guess one of the early ones that I started dabbling in was Spanish. At that point, I'd already been doing French for a few years, and I'd done my 1-year Italian GCSE. So it kind of seemed natural to have a look at Spanish. So I do own some Teach Yourself Spanish books, a big Spanish dictionary, a couple of other resources. And I have looked at it on and off over the years. I mean, for me, Spanish, when I hear Spanish, I can understand some. When I see it written, I can understand some. But I've never studied it enough that really I'd feel confident speaking anything. So I could understand but not be understood, I guess, is the best way to think of it. And that is true for some other languages that I've dabbled in a little bit as well, such as Norwegian and Swedish, because I've studied Danish. They feel kind of familiar to me. I can read some, I can understand some when I hear it. But again, I could have a go at speaking, probably more than Spanish, but it wouldn't be perfect. So those are probably the obvious ones. There's some others that along the way I've kind of come to understand a little bit. We went to Belgium for a choir tour. This is going back quite a few years. I was still at school at this point, at high school. And that was I at high school? No, I was at uni. I lie. I was at uni then. And I learned a tiny bit of Flemish and Dutch, Flemish, having done Danish and German. They kind of make a bit of sense to me. I can understand some if I hear it or see it, but I'm not going to be speaking it that much. Languages where I have actively tried to learn them, but only for a short term, is usually when there's been an event or I've been going on holiday. So, for example, I did learn some Greek. We went to Crete, my mother, sister, and I, back when I was younger. That would be high school time. And we only booked the holiday 2 weeks before we went. And I went out the same day we booked it and got a Teach Yourself Greek book. And I just learned enough to, order food, say thank you, say yes, no, that kind of stuff. Those basic kind of tourist holiday phrases. And it was an interesting language, but there's not enough time in the day to keep to learn every language in the world, obviously. So I did have to decide if I wanted to continue with it. And I decided not to, simply because other than that holiday, I wasn't really consuming any Greek material from anywhere. So there was no obvious reason for me to continue it. So I still got all the books, and maybe one day I will go back to it. But for now, that was just a little holiday bit of learning. A similar thing's true with Russian. I have books for Russian. And that's because, again, around the university time, we had a visiting choir from Russia, and I wanted to learn a few phrases to greet them and say a few things to them about music. So I bought Teach Yourself books again, and I just learned enough to do what I wanted to do, to say. Because I've studied Czech, I do actually pick up odd bits of Russian. It's not perfect. It's not as close as like the Swedish to Danish or the Dutch to German, but I can sort of understand it here and there. And again, it's an interesting language and one that I wouldn't mind doing more in the future, but at the moment I just don't have the time for it or the need for this kind of stuff I'm consuming. I'm not watching or reading a lot or wanting to read a lot in Russian, so that's why that one dropped off. I have a few other eclectic books on my shelves, I have to say, for languages. I wrote my BA dissertation on the use of mythology and language in the works of J.R. Tolkien. And for that, I bought Teach Yourself Welsh and Finnish books because those are the languages that the Elvish languages are based on. So I've never really looked at them in terms of actually learning the language. It was just for comparisons with Elvish. So I do have books on Elvish, Tolkien's Elvish languages as well. I was really interested, I was really interested, I'm still interested in ancient Egypt. So I also have a couple of books on reading hieroglyphics, which I was fairly serious about at one point, and got to the point where I could go to the British Museum and I could understand some of the tomb inscriptions, but I don't remember it anymore. I mean, it's dropped off over the years. So there's those. I'm interested in the development of English as well. So I do have books on Old English, like the Anglo-Saxon era English, Middle English, the language of Chaucer. So those are on my shelf as well. Randomly, I have a few books on Croatian, and these actually came from my sister because she really loved the actor Goran Vicnic. And because she loved him so much, she wanted to learn Croatian, but it lasted about a week, I think. And the books ended up coming to me. And so I've never studied them, but when I flick through, it actually looks a little bit similar to Czech in some ways. So I probably could pick it up if I ever get around to it. I've also got a few random books on Esperanto just because I was interested in what it was like. And I saw a few in a secondhand bookstore once and picked them up. But again, I've never really actively studied it. So those are some of the really eclectic titles on my bookshelf, and languages that I've kind of dabbled in for holidays, or that I understand a bit because of other languages I've studied, even though I've never studied those languages in any detail. There are always new languages that appeal to me, and I have to kind of hold myself back a lot because I just don't have the time. I was going to say I'm studying 8 languages, but it's actually 9 because that probably leads in quite neatly into my new language, which I don't have time for, but I'm learning it anyway. And this is Chinese, and that is because, for one reason only really, I have a Chinese sister-in-law. And when I talk to people now, since I started Korean and Japanese, if they find out I have a Chinese sister-in-law, then the question they ask every single time is, well, why are you not learning Chinese then? And it was always a thing about time, and I was a bit hesitant about the pronunciation for Chinese. I didn't think I really had the ear for it, for the tones. But I thought, well, it is a bit of a waste when I have someone with whom I could practice, which is a real boon for me because most of my languages, I don't have anyone with whom I can practice. So I decided to give it a go. I'm not taking it too seriously at this stage. I've bought myself a couple of books on grammar and characters and a workbook. But at the moment, I'm mostly just starting out the early levels in Duolingo and just having a little bit of a look and getting a feel for it. I've done a couple of free MOOCs online, one just on characters, another just on sort of beginner Chinese. So I'll see how I go. At the moment, I'm finding that in terms of understanding the characters, having done Japanese helps. The grammar of Chinese is fairly simple, so that seems pretty straightforward. I don't think I'll have problems with that. I can imagine myself being able to read it and maybe even write it a little bit without too much work, but I am definitely struggling with the pronunciation. And I tried a few lines on my sister-in-law the other day, and she knew what I wanted to say, but she did correct my pronunciation on quite a few words. So I definitely haven't got my ear in for it yet. And I think maybe Korean and Japanese pronunciation is definitely easier, but also I'm listening to a lot of it. When I started Japanese, I was already watching a lot of anime and listening to Japanese musicals. And with Korean, I was already watching K-dramas, listening to Korean musicals. So, and I carried on in both those activities. So as I'm learning, I'm hearing it all the time. Whereas Chinese, I'm not. I've watched the odd Chinese drama, mostly boy love dramas like The Untamed. But I can count them on sort of one hand. I'm not watching anything in Chinese or listening to anything Chinese regularly. And maybe if I did, then that would help. But we'll see what the future brings. At the moment, I'm doing Chinese, but I'll see how I go, how long I keep it up, and whether I make it one of my regular ones or not. So this was just a quick little chat about the languages I've dabbled in. It seems quite early doing this video at this time of the month. I was going to do it next week, but because my next week is looking pretty hectic and I had a half-hour free before my Korean class starts shortly, I thought it was a good time just to slot it in and pop it out there. So that's me anyway. That's the languages I dabble in. If you dabble in any languages, drop a comment below. Let me know why. And I'll be back again next month. It's one of those days, isn't it? I can't even remember what I'm talking about next time. It might be anecdotes. I've got content planned for this series until the end of the year, and then it will finish. So we've still got, September, October, November, December, another 4 more videos to come after this one. So I hope you'll join me for them. We will be talking language learning anecdotes. We'll be talking things I love in the languages I study. We'll be having a look at how my language study went this year, towards the end of the year, and what my plans are for next year, and things like that. So do come back for the remaining videos, and I will end this one for now, but I'll see you all soon. Bye.